When we think of a revolution, we usually picture political clashes, right? But sometimes a revolution happens quietly on a canvas or in a block of marble or in the clean lines of a building. Today we're talking about Neoclassicism, an artistic movement so powerful it didn't just change how art looked, it totally redefined the look of reason, virtue, and society itself.
Okay, so to really get just how radical neoclassicism was, you first have to understand what it was fighting against. On one side, you had Rococo, the super ornate, playful, almost fluffy style of the aristocracy. And then, bam, neoclassicism crashes onto the scene as a total rejection of all that. It's all about order, clarity, seriousness, and this powerful new idea of civic virtue. It was basically a visual battle for the soul of the 18th century.
And look, this kind of thing doesn't just happen out of nowhere. I mean, art doesn't just wake up one day and decide to get all serious. So what happened? What was going on in the world that could possibly trigger such a dramatic, fundamental shift?
Well, the answer really comes down to two massive cultural shifts happening at the exact same time. A complete revolution in how people were thinking and, pretty amazingly, a literal unearthing of the ancient past. Let's dig into how these two forces came together to forge something entirely new.
So first up, you've got the brains of the operation, the Age of Enlightenment. This was a time when brilliant thinkers like Rousseau and Voltaire were putting everything under a microscope. They championed reason, logic, and scientific thinking over blind faith and old traditions. They were questioning everything, from the absolute power of kings to the authority of the church, and arguing that society ought to be built on rational, logical principles. This new way of thinking needed a new kind of art to go with it.
And then, right as all this new thinking is bubbling up, something absolutely incredible happens. Archaeologists start digging up the ancient Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum, which had been buried for centuries under volcanic ash. I mean, can you imagine? For the very first time, people had a direct, unfiltered window into the classical world. Suddenly, this wasn't just some story from a book. It was real. And its art, with all its symmetry, its order, and its dignified restraint, was the absolute perfect visual match for the Age of Reason.
And if you want to boil the whole movement down to one sentence, the art historian Johann Joachim Winckelmann totally nailed it with this quote. He argued that the only path to true greatness was to look back and learn from the harmony and the moral seriousness of Greek and Roman art. This basically became the movement's rallying cry.
Okay, so we've got the big ideas, we've got the ancient inspiration, but what did this revolution actually look like? How did artists and architects take these principles and turn them into something you could see? Let's take a look, starting with one of the most famous paintings of the entire era. All right, check this out. This is The Oath of the Horatii by Jacques-Louis David from 1784. This was way more than just a painting. It was a bombshell political statement. It became a symbol of the French Revolution, which, by the way, would explode just 5 years after this was painted.
So the story here comes straight from ancient Rome. You have 3 brothers who are swearing an oath to fight and die for Rome, even though they know it will completely devastate their family. I mean, think about how radical this message was at the time. Your duty to your country, to the state, comes before everything else, even your own loved ones.
And just look at how David put this together. You won't find any soft, fluffy clouds or playful little angels here. The composition is rigid, it's severe, and it's almost mathematically perfect. You have these strong, angular lines of the men on the left set against the collapsing, grieving curves of the women on the right. It's a picture of reason and duty, crushing personal emotion, a direct visual assault on everything Rococo stood for. So when people in the 1780s saw this, they didn't just see some old story. They saw a call to arms. It was telling them that sacrificing yourself for a higher ideal, for the nation, was the greatest virtue of all. Art wasn't just pretty stuff for your wall anymore. It had become a powerful tool for changing society.
And this revolutionary fire, it wasn't just happening in paintings. Let's take a look at the Pantheon in Paris. This building actually started out as a church, but during the French Revolution, it was transformed into a mausoleum for the nation's great citizens. A temple, not for a god, but for the people.
Its whole design just screams neoclassical principles. You can see the clean lines and the bold, simple geometric shapes, a total rejection of fussy decoration. And yeah, it has a monumental scale, but it's meant to inspire awe for the nation, not for a king. This was architecture built for the public, meant to symbolize the strength and permanence of the new republic.
And believe me, this new way of thinking didn't just stop with painting and architecture. This search for order,
logic and reason started rippling out across every part of the culture. You can see these same core ideas popping up absolutely everywhere. In literature, writers like Samuel Johnson were all about reason and morality. In architecture, designers were dreaming up these massive, logical structures. And even way later, composers like Igor Stravinsky looked back to the clarity and balance of this era for inspiration. The underlying goal was always the same: a belief that structure and reason were the path to truth, whether you were creating a poem, a building, or a symphony.
So it's really easy to just file this away as another ism from a stuffy art history textbook, right? But the thing is, the legacy of neoclassicism is literally all around us, usually hiding in plain sight. Let's talk about why it's still so important today.
What neoclassicism did was create a whole visual language for new ideas about democracy and public life. When new republics like the United States and France were being born, who did they look to as role models? Ancient Greece and Rome. So it only made sense that they'd adopt their art and architecture to symbolize those powerful ideals of democracy and
I mean, really think about it for a second. Why do so many of our important government buildings, like the White House or the Capitol, look like Greek temples? Why do our banks, museums, and universities use grand columns and domes? It's because we still, to this day, connect that style with authority, stability, intellect, and virtue. That neoclassical DNA is even in things like luxury fashion, which uses those same clean lines and symmetry to suggest timeless elegance.
So in the end, neoclassicism was so much more than just a style. It was a powerful belief in the ability of order and reason to build a better, more logical society. And that brings us to a final thought, which isn't just about art history, but about right now. Where else in our modern world do we see that same intense, passionate search for order and reason trying to shape our future?